Across the pond.
Good evening and welcome to another episode of Across the Pond. You with me, UAPLee. We're back with an impromptu episode that kind of sprang on us yesterday, but it's something I got to grab with both hands, an opportunity. This evening we're joined by a very special guest, none other than Richard Doty, or Rick. Which would you prefer to be addressed as, sir?
Rick is fine.
Rick it is. Rick, thank you so much for jumping on and spending a bit of time with us this evening. I appreciate you're a very busy man. Just to put some context out there, Rick was a former US Air Force member and worked in some of the shady areas of the intelligence services, shall we say. But I'm going to let you explain. I don't want to, jump in. I've got the man here. I may as well hear it from the horse's mouth. Rick, please do give us a little bit of a background on what it is you did get up to for the US Air Force.
Yeah, I joined the Air Force Office of Special Investigations back in the 70s. I was joined as a counterintelligence officer. I went to a number of different schools to be trained in counterintelligence, counterespionage operations. The schooling lasted about a year. And then I was assigned, my first assignment was at Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico, Albuquerque, New Mexico. And that's where I am famously connected to the Paul Benowitz case. That was one of the cases that I ran during my time at Kirtland Air Force Base. It wasn't the only one, but it was one that is quite prominent in the UFO community today. I've spoke many times about what happened and what I did, what I had to do as a counterintelligence officer. People have, the UFO community in general has accepted the fact that I was ordered to do things and I did it. But there's always skeptics out there who flood the market with innuendos or lies about what I did during that time. We're not here to talk about Paul Benowitz. I'm just wanted to clear the air, so to speak, that everything I did was, in fact, sanctioned by the United States government.
Yeah, for sure. And, I'm a military guy myself.
Things.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to try and reassure people there. I wanted to say, just coming from my side, I spent 20 years in the British military, and we've been to Afghanistan and Iraq in those times. There are times when you're just doing your job as a military, man, as a service personnel. You're just doing your job. You're following the orders. But I want to tell people now that there is humanity within us. We're not just these robotic machines. We are human. So a job's a job, and this is why I suppose you've come forward after the years that have passed then and told your story and where we are now. Your humanity's led you to this point. Am I right?
Yes, exactly. I had a non-disclosure agreement up until 2002, and after that I was free to talk about well, not everything that I did, but most of what I did during my time in. And then I came out and did it, and I've talked about it. I have shows on Gaia and UNMN TV. So I'm telling my story, and I've told it over the years. So I hope that people can understand, like you said, I thank you for your service to your country. I didn't serve the 20 like you did, but I served Indian counterintelligence, which is different than being in the military. You're a civil servant. I did serve in the regular Air Force for 4 years. I got out, went to college, and joined the intelligence service. And the U.S. intelligence service is a bit different. Most people don't realize what it entails and what we have to do to get in, and what we have to do while we're in. There's a lot of almost everything you do within the intelligence community is classified one way or the other, whether it's top secret or just confidential. But there's strict rules on what we can do and what we can't do, and we have to follow those rules. And during my time and I left the U.S. intelligence in 1988, so I've been out a long time. But after that time, I got out. I worked for Dr. Hal Puthoff at the Institute for Advanced Studies for a number of years, and I did have a security clearance there, and I had to do some things there that were sensitive. But now I'm out. I'm free to talk about what I do. Again, there are still things that I can't talk about, and I won't talk about. But the majority of the work I did during my time in U.S. intelligence, counterintelligence for the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, I can talk about.
Yeah. And I suppose that mean, there's a lot of things that you've come out and spoke about over the years, and we could hone in on any one of those things and probably spend the entire, call talking about that. One area I wanted to hone in on particularly this evening is something you've sort of alluded to already, being a member of the intelligence. I suppose it would make you privy to certain information of maybe who these individuals are. So that area being the Men in Black, or this clandestine group of individuals that, they show up very conveniently and remove sort of evidence and suppress conversation and all the rest of it. And yeah, as I've said already, the Men in Black, and I suppose you've come out and you've spoke about that before, but I'd love to just go into a little bit of detail on who these people are. If you would share that with us.
Okay, well, let's talk about the history of the Men in Black. The cliche or the name Men in Black, those three words, just didn't show up one day. The prominence of that came back in the 50s when a guy wrote a book about UFOs and saucers, and ended up mentioning the Men in Black who allegedly visited him and told him not to write about a certain story. And over the years, there's been other people within the UFO community talking about the Men in Black. And back in the days of the 50s and 60s, these Men in Black were allegedly aliens or extraterrestrials, because they would show up right after a UFO landing or an event. And then they would visit the witnesses and ask for film, or trying to convince the witnesses to not talk about what occurred. And so who they were back in those days is a good question, because there was an incident that happened in 1959 in New Mexico, where I live, where two fishermen happened to see something land at a lake that they were at, and these Men in Black showed up before the authorities showed up, before they had the opportunity to report what they saw. Now, New Mexico back then was remote. There wasn't a phone. Obviously, nobody had cell phones back then. These two fishermen would have had to gone miles to a phone to report this incident. But just after the incident and after the craft had left, these two Men in Black showed up. And that's a really classic case that's been talked about by Wendell Stevens. In fact, one of the witnesses, one of the men that confronted these two Men in Black, one of the fishermen, showed up at a UFO convention some years ago. They're of course past. They're dead now, both of them. But he talked about that event, and he referred to them without any prior knowledge as the Men in Black, because they were dressed all in black, had a hat, dark glasses, so you couldn't see their eyes, and so it was somewhat of a classical contact with the Men in Black. Now, he was thoroughly convinced, this person, his last name was Harris, was thoroughly convinced that these things were aliens and not humans, because of the way they spoke. They spoke mechanically. And so now I can't connect what happened in the past with what I can talk about as I know, or connect the Men in Black today. Now, we do have within the intelligence community a group of people that because we don't call them men in black, but the public would call them men in black. We have a special unit within the Air Force Special Activities group out of Fort Belvoir, which is in Maryland. These guys are specially trained, gals and girls, because there's females involved. They're specially trained to do the type of work that nobody else wants to or can do. They operate pretty much outside the law, so to speak. And they do show up at UFO events or after UFO events to obtain information that I couldn't get. Me being a counterintelligence officer, I would go out and try to get information from a witness or somebody that had contact with an extraterrestrial. And I would have to operate under the law, within the law. If I couldn't obtain something, or if I couldn't complete a particular mission, then I would notify my headquarters, who would then notify this unit out of Fort Belvoir, and they would send out the men in black, so to speak. We wouldn't call them that. We call them we just call them the odd men within the intelligence community. But we would send out these men in black to get men or women, depending on the situation and depending on what type of access we needed to that victim or that person witness. And they would come out and they'd get the information one way or the other. Now, I can't speak for how they do their work or what information they can get or can't get. But believe me, the few times that I've used this particular unit out of Fort Belvoir, they were able to obtain what we needed. And how they did it, it was up to them. But off the record, so to speak, they probably were able to break into a person's house or convince them in some way, whether it would be a bullying tactic or a strong arm tactic, to release the information that we needed pertaining to a particular case involving a UFO. These men and women were dressed, not necessarily all in black, but they had their own clothing. They had their own appearance. Some of the appearances can be disguises, and they had a unique ability to act in a certain way to convince a person to release whatever we wanted them, whatever information we needed from that particular witness or the victim. And so these men and women were specially trained, highly trained. You didn't just get hired off the street. Most of them were military, and then in the military we have a procedure called sheep dipping, and what that meant was we would recruit somebody within the military ranks, whether it was Army, Navy, Marine, or Air Force, and then we would train them to do this job, and we would consider that job as human or human collection of information. Human, that's what human is called, and that's their primary mission, is to obtain intelligence. And so, but when after all the training, which would be military and some civilian training, a DIA and CIA, they would then be put into the field. There were certain operating locations all around the United States and all over the world, actually. And they would operate out of these secret locations. And then they would be sheep dipped, meaning their military identity would be taken away and a civilian identity would be placed on them. And now I can almost guarantee you those civilian identities were not the real identities. They were fake identities or cover identities. We call them cover identities. So they could do their job. So one day they may be John Smith. The next day they might be a Timothy Harris. The next day they might be somebody else.
Yeah, we've got a similar thing in our core.
Yeah, we worked with MOD. We worked with SAS, I know, had a team of people, and in fact, I was talking about this not too long ago. We were going to do a show about this particular unit within the SAS, your British SAS, that were trained to do some things out of the ordinary, so to speak, and we trained them. They picked a site, and we went to the Shetland Islands, and we trained them. This was back in the 80s, and we also trained them to do certain things that are kind of out of this world, so to speak, regarding extraterrestrials. What if getting sidetracked a little bit, but what if an extraterrestrial race was trying to invade Earth, or maybe just a group of them? How do you fight them? So we knew how. We developed the method, and that was in our Tier 1 system, meaning our special forces. And so we did train the British SAS, a particular team, I think it was 35 of them, how to do it, how to train them. And it's still probably some of it's classified, but it wasn't just a British.
I've got to ask you.
We trained the Germans and the French also.
When you say that you knew how to fight an extraterrestrial threat, can you speak anything about that? I mean, you've just kind of threw that carrot out there dangling. I'd be stupid if I didn't ask. How do you know when you say we knew how to fight them? Go on. What did you know how to fight?
Well, when I say we, I don't necessarily mean me. I mean our special forces people, our Tier 1 people. And, Tier 1 is our best of the best. Our Rangers, our special forces, our Delta, our Navy SEALs, our Air Force commandos. The U.S. government developed the system. Now let's go back a little bit. We have been visited. I think that's pretty much a given, even though the U.S. government or the nations haven't come out and said, "Yeah, we'll accept that." But we have been visited by extraterrestrials. We found them in crash sites. We've had them in captivity. We have their spacecrafts. So that's a given. As far as I'm concerned, that's a given. I think there's so many people out there that have already come forth and talked about it. So now we know that they are here. Now, one of the things we found out is it's just not one particular race of extraterrestrials. There's more than one that have visited Earth, and we've had more than one in captivity. They're different biologics. They come from different star groups, and so they're different. So some of them even have to breathe certain atmospheres, such as methane. So we had to develop a way, just in case, we had to neutralize these things. And so we found that depending on the category of extraterrestrials, we could use a particular method, such as depriving them of oxygen or their environment, to neutralize them. And we also had some high energy tasers. They were called high energy probe back in those days. It's like a high energy taser that the law enforcement police officers carry today, but they were high energy because some of the extraterrestrials, a bullet will pass right through them. If you fire a 9mm or a 7.62, it just goes right through them. They're almost like a vegetable. It doesn't hurt them. So how do you hurt them? You have to penetrate their vital organs. So you have to teach somebody where their vital organs are. And so that's the type of method that we taught other various special forces around the world, not just British, but German and French, and I think a couple other countries.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that you hear about a lot. For myself, I was in the Royal Corps of Signals, so I was all communications based, and there's branches within my corps that's, it spreads out within special forces and the special communications type of work, and that does involve, small pockets of very small teams dotted all over the world. So I can see how that would how that would work in, with the same, with what you guys basically do. It's sort of what a lot of our guys do as well. We work in the intelligence, the special agent handling stuff as well. But one of the I don't want to. I mean, we're getting very sidetracked. I know we were talking about the Men in Black, but one of the things that you mentioned there that I found interesting was talking about with the MOD getting involved. I know that Nick Pope, he's been one of the guys that's been quite vocal about the MOD and their desk. And we're going to spiral back round to the Men in Black. I want to talk about the Calvine incident, which is something that Nick Pope's mentioned before as having the photo that was blown up above the desk of the MOD. During that incident, the Men in Black obviously were noted to be on site. And again, they were dressed in the way that you described, with the hat, the glasses, and they seemed to be unaware of the weather and the situation around them, the pouring rain. They scared the Jesus out of the two chaps, the hikers that had the photos. They made them hand over the evidence and be quiet. And the chef was a witness to it, and he pretty much described what you described. But what you mentioned is you came from a group of people that work within the US intelligence service. From what I've gathered, or what other people may suggest, is the Men in Black themselves seem to be a global organization. It doesn't seem to matter where these events are happening. They're turning up there, regardless of whether it's a NATO country or somewhere that the US would have access into, which does again suggest that perhaps it's not just the government, this isn't just a government agency. Maybe it could be a multinational agency with corruption, fingers into the tentacles of the military might that is the US military. You know what I mean? As Eisenhower said, beware the might of the military complex. Do you think there's anything to that?
Yeah, I think there is. I think that there is I know it's a worldwide phenomenon. I've lectured in Japan. I've lectured in Singapore. I've lectured in Seoul, South Korea, South Africa, New Delhi. I've been all around the world. Manchester, Blackpool, London, Copenhagen, Stockholm. I'm all over the world. And this is a question that is brought up at every, I can't think of one lecture or convention I was at that the question about a Men in Black hadn't come up. And they're saying the same thing as you saying, that they had a UFO event and these men, and in some cases a woman, would show up after the event to get information. And so they would coin them, depending on the language, but Men in Black. And so they're connecting those Men in Black with the United States. But I don't know everything there is to know about the government or about how we operated. But I think that there are some cases where that case that Nick's a good friend of mine. In fact, Nick and I filmed Ancient Alien episode, which will air later on this year in California. But that incident, there's really no explanation of where these two humanoids came from. I would like to think that they were probably U.S. Personnel stationed at a base in the UK or at a location in UK that knew about this, but it doesn't fit the category. Listening to Nick explain it and the witnesses, it doesn't fit the category of somebody that I would identify as a Men in Black. So you might be right that there is some secret organization that's governing these things all over the world. I don't know about them. I wish I did. I've heard rumors. I talked to when I was in Blackpool in 2022 at a UFO convention there. I met an Interpol officer. He worked for Interpol. He's British, but he was stationed in Germany, and he talked about this. And he said that he thought maybe that the United Nations had a particular secret society or secret group that did this. Well, I checked into it and I can't find any information on it. And I can't say that there isn't, but like you say,
Well,
it's
if you,
happening
if
not
you could
just
just,
in the United
if
States, but over the world.
yes, for sure. And if you just allow, I mean, if you just connect a few dots with me, if you can just allow yourself to indulge the inner child, let's connect the dots for a moment. We're talking about
Sure.
a potential multinational organization here, also known as potentially the Men in Black. But then you hear other stories about things like maybe Michael Herrera's case, for instance, where him and a group of Marines strolled out through the jungle into a clearing, and there was a group of people dressed in black military paraphernalia, no badges, nothing on display. What looked to be this huge UFO there, which took off at a ridiculous pace, and it looked like they were trafficking people, or they looked like they were putting people on board, from his account. And then recently, again, we've had the other from is it Roddy, the new account that's come forward from Roddy, this a military man, another Marine again, that's come forward and said a similar case, that him and his patrol, they were out on maneuvers. I think it was somewhere down your neck of the woods, actually, somewhere down in New Mexico, and they came through this desert clearing, what looked to be this huge UFO, and a load of people in black again, black Humvees, no badges, nothing, but speaking with military accent, that basically shushed them, threatened them at gunpoint, told them to shut up, and then again with their hierarchy, that when the Marines returned to base, again told nothing, to basically just be quiet about it, and that be it. Is there a potential case here that, or could you make a connection perhaps with the Men in Black, these people that go around suppressing people at doors, basically at the front doors, and maybe these random groups of what seems to be mercenaries or military, very highly trained military personnel, working with these reverse engineered craft, maybe for these multinational companies? Is there a connection there, do you think, if you could allow yourself to play with that?
I can, I can rationalize that, and I can foresee a company like Lockheed or Raytheon hiring people like that. We know, I mean, the public knows that Lockheed hires ex-intelligence officers, counterintelligence officers
Jake
like
Barber.
myself. I know some. Yeah. I know some former retired or former OSI agents that now work for a defense contractor, Boeing, a Raytheon, or some of the others. So yes, I can foresee that these defense contractors would have a unit like that could go out and pose as Men in Black to get information, or to create some disinformation or deception operation to keep whatever secret that the company wants to keep away from the public. I can foresee that. And another idea that I think that has been mentioned out there, not by me, but I think it's a valid point, is DARPA. DARPA is the one that funds these companies, these defense contractors. Now, DARPA in itself only has about 225 employees, but they dealing in about $6 billion to $20 billion. Could they have some kind of a secret out of those 225 employees of a secret group that did this? Absolutely. I think DARPA could very well be one of the guilty parties, so to speak, and sending people out posed as a Men in Black.
Well, again, if we can just allow ourselves just to play with it, maybe as children, think of the people as well that say, and there are people out there that do suggest that deals have been struck within the last 60 years between maybe NHI and certain government entities that may have been farmed out to these multinational companies. Do you think that it's possible that there is some kind of relationship between these companies and legitimate NHI where everybody's in on it and they are working together, the reverse engineered craft? There are these subterranean facilities where the bottom floor is strictly for NHI to work and operate clandestinely. And then maybe there is an element of these men in black, these mercenary groups that have been assembled by these multinational companies. There is an element of NHI embedded within there, which would give credence to what you suggested, perhaps in the early days where NHI were part of the men in black as we know them, or as we knew them then. What do you think maybe to that as just a speculative idea? Do you think there's anything there?
Well, you could speculate. Yeah, you could speculate on anything. I personally, during my time in, all my time in intelligence, and I had access to a lot of special access programs or sensitive compartmented information. I never read or I never spoke to anyone that mentioned any kind of secret alliance we had with extraterrestrials. So officially, I don't know. Now, I can foresee that maybe that, and I didn't know everything. I didn't have access to everything. Okay, so obviously it could be happening. I just didn't have access to it. But I'm saying I've never heard about it. I heard a lot about a lot of things, and a lot of which I can't even talk about. But that wasn't one of them I heard. But I can foresee that if we had contact, and we've had contact over the years with a particular extraterrestrial race, such as the Ebens, the one that we found in the Roswell crash that was alive, kept in captivity at 52. Maybe we formed some kind of alliance with them. J-Rod, the extraterrestrial found in the Kingman craft that was working with us at Area 51. A side note on that, I worked at Area 51. I was a counterintelligence officer there on 2 different occasions on a temporary duty assignment there to relieve somebody that had gotten sick. Now, I saw a vehicle every morning when I walked from my billets over to the OSI office. I saw this vehicle, a special vehicle, boxed with almost like a communications box, no windows in it, with J-Rod on the side of it. Well, I thought it was a company. I didn't know, I was never briefed about it. But once I got to the office, I asked my boss, I said, what's this company called J-Rod? And he said, what do you mean? I said, I see this vehicle every morning and it had J-Rod on it. What does that mean? He said, you're not cleared for it. So I said, oh, okay. So later on, I had access to S2. Now, everybody out there is talking about S4. Lazar is talking about S4, but actually, I knew it as S2. I went out to S2. I saw parked there that vehicle with J-Rod on it. And over the time I spent there, bits and bits of information came out that we had an extraterrestrial that worked there at S2 that was helping us. And then later on, we connected it to the Kingman crash, and that's the history of that. But so we know we had extraterrestrials working like J-Rod. Maybe there were more than that. So in that case, yes, we did have an alliance with them. They helped us with technology or reverse engineering, and we helped them do whatever. I mean, I don't know what we would have helped them with, but maybe biologics, maybe genetics, maybe we allowed them to crossbreed, because we know, and I knew, that we had hybrids. Now, maybe these hybrids are part of the Men in Black too. I mean, that's another category of entities that we know exist. I knew exist during my time in. I have to be careful what I say, but we knew that there were hybrids. In fact, if you go to Gaia, you listen to my episode on the Katie Smith story. Katie Smith was a hybrid, and she worked for OSI. She was a counterintelligence officer. She didn't know she was a hybrid until an event occurred in her life where she realized that she was a hybrid. And she had anatomical features that were different than a human, and other things that were different. I can't go into details, but she had, and then she had a unique abilities. I'll just leave it at that. And so she helped us identify other hybrids. So we know there were a lot of other hybrids. So what's that mean? That means that at some point in our evolution, extraterrestrials were involved.
You know, we had a reverend on the other week, and we were discussing this, and I was going into detail with the reverend regarding the Book of Enoch and the Nephilim, and what that means really, and what, you know, and you can look around at 250 religions worldwide, I think it is, and they all mention that there's these gods or whatever these deities are, these divine entities that take the wives of the humans. You know, they take the humans' wives, and that's how these deities are born. And you know, these Nephilim, the gods, the giants, and all the rest of it. So there's a massive religious link to this topic, as well as the technological stuff that everybody thinks and knows of today when they're talking about the UFOs and spaceships flying around. But these things have been here a while, so people are saying, or so people think, and probably are going to be around for the future. But I'll start tying a bow on it now. I know that, like I said, you're a busy man and you've joined us, you know, on your own time this evening, and I'm very grateful for that. But one thing I want to do is just finish off with maybe a couple of questions. One of which is there's a hearing coming up next week in the Senate, I believe, the next congressional hearing on UAPs and the declassification of, I don't know what they're trying to do on declassify anymore. I'm that lost on this topic now. Are we going for disclosure or anything else? I don't know. We'll just see what happens. But you've mentioned and alluded to the fact that this is very compartmentalized as a topic, and maybe we'll never get through the red tape and the bureaucracy. What do you think of the next hearing coming up next week? Do you believe that it's going to gain any ground? Could there be something big coming? What do you think?
Good question. It's going to depend on the whistleblowers that they bring forward, and what the whistleblowers are allowed to say. Now, you know, that's a touchy topic within the government. I'm a member of the Advanced Working Group, which is a group of almost all retired intelligence officers or retired military intelligence officers. Some go back. They've been around a long time. Some of them are up there in their 80s and 90s. They've been around a long time. And we are trying to facilitate a disclosure within the government. We deal mostly with the U.S. Senate, but which is like similar to your House of Lords. But we try to help them. We try to assist in identifying whistleblowers or the right people that have experienced a UFO incident or event to come forth and talk about it. Now, it's going to depend on what the House of Representatives or the Senate will allow, and what the government will allow. You know, we have three branches of the government. All the secret stuff, all the intelligence communities, all the military is stuck in the executive branch of the government. So that means the executive branch has control over what information can be released.
They're the
Senate,
unelected officials,
which
right?
is the legislative branch. Right. And they're right. And so it's a touchy situation. I don't imagine, I can't imagine full disclosure from ever happening, but I can imagine partial disclosure happening. Now, we're not going to come out and open the Pentagon's vaults and says, here's what we have. Here's everything we have, and here's everything that the extraterrestrial has given us. We're not going to disclose sources and methods or high technology because we don't want the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, or the North Koreans to get hold of it, any of that stuff. So that stuff will never come out. But the mere fact that we have been visited, they've been here, we've gotten things from them. I think if disclosure is done in a practical and an intelligent manner, I think it can happen.
Do you think that could happen at the next hearing, or
hearings,
unlikely?
No, I don't think. I think we'll get a little bit, but you're going to hear this phrase. I can't talk outside
a skiff.
I can't talk to you in the public. I have to go to a skiff to talk. That's what you're going to hear, because that's the information, the real good information that we want to hear, the public, and I'm a part of the public. Even though I know some things, I don't know all. I want to hear more. That's what we won't hear, is what's going to be discussed in the skiff.
Sadly, I think we could both agree that's probably going to be the case, which leads me on to the final question, actually. And it nicely leads onto it, I think. There's a lot of people in the world talking about catastrophic disclosure potentially being an option. There's a lot of whispers in the air with potentially what this three-eye atlas thing may be, and talks of, elevations of consciousness, and, Chris Bledsoe talks about a new knowledge being bestowed upon mankind in 2026, which again falls into, what this potentially could bring with three-eye atlas. And, there's a lot of talk about things happening within the next couple of years, whether we like it or not, whether the governments or these multinational entities like it or not. What do you say to that?
Well, I think the three-eye atlas is a comet. My personal feeling is a comet. I'm an amateur astronomer. I have a cabin up in the mountains. I have my small observatory with my own telescopes. I track that thing. It doesn't show any abnormal anomalies. I think it's a comet. That's my personal feeling. Just me talking.
Well, there seems to be a lot of information coming from
about
people.
Anything else.
I mean, Avi Loeb's spoken about it, and then there's recent information that's come from James Webb that NASA have finally released. And the thing that they seem to be very surprised by the amount of light this thing's radiating. It doesn't seem to be matching with the amount that should be radiated from essentially ice particles, or what we would usually see on a comet. It seems to be making its own light, so they seem to suggest. Which seems to be, raising more questions than giving answers. Whether it's an NHI thing, I don't know. But do you think something catastrophic in the way of disclosure could be on the horizon for us, based on how much tiptoeing around the topic and the government seem to be doing?
Well, I think if the government told us everything they knew about, not just three, there are three other objects that are in our solar system that, unless you pick up a astronomy magazine or something, nobody's talking about, that could very well be extraterrestrial. But three-eye atlas, the thing that a lot of people are, within the, not UFO people, but people within the government, scientists, chemists. I went to college. In the chemistry lab, you can create light. You put certain elements. Now, we don't know all the elements that's in that. We know a lot. I mean, you can Google this and you can see all the different elements that's in that comet. The
seems to be mainly carbon dioxide
atlas.
Currently.
Yeah, there's carbon dioxide, but there's some other, could be other elements. And so you could make its own light. So, I mean, that in itself is not necessary. What I find fascinating is what some people are privately saying that hasn't necessarily went full public, is the signals that are being generated from within that comet that are tones and pulses that we can't answer. Avi Loeb can't answer it. Gary Nolan can't answer it. Some of these other astronomers that I listen to and I watch, I jump on their website all the time. They hear this. Now, NASA's not saying yes or no. They're non-committal when you ask them, are we getting signals from this? They're not telling us. So if we are getting signals, obviously that could be being intelligently controlled. Now, is it remotely being controlled, or if it is something inside it? Now, there's this other guy, and this guy, he's he's a fascinating person. He's a scientist, and I used to teach math too. So him and I get together and we talk about things. He's claiming that the signals are being generated from Pluto to that craft. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but something, interesting if it was remotely. But it's not going that fast. It's going 58 kilometers per second, which is not really that fast, but it has changed course. Now, can a comet do that? Yes. There's scientists, astrophysics, physicists can say, yeah, it can happen. But most say, no, it's on a direct path. And it's not a plane. You got the Earth and the sun. It's coming in on a plane, which is really odd for a comet to do. So there's a lot of anomalies that maybe we can't answer. And is it intelligently controlled? And do we know about it? I wish a government would tell us everything they knew about it. But I do find that fascinating. But getting back to your question about disclosure, I don't think we're going to get any fascinating or earth-shattering disclosure during the congressional hearings next week.
But do you think? Yeah, I know. I agree with you. Like I said, I think I tend to agree with you on that one. I don't think we're ever going to get that from the official sources. But again, there's been mention of the aliens or ET, NHI taking it into their own hands within the next few years and giving us that catastrophic disclosure that people fear, or maybe the government fears. Do you think that that's a possibility? And maybe not, forgetting Three Eye Atlas, but do you think there may be something from the guys above as opposed to the government, the men in suits telling us?
Yes. I've listened to John Ramirez. I've listened to a number of other people speak. Within our advanced working group, we have very intelligent people. One particular one talks about this event that's supposed to happen between October of 2025 and August of 2027. There's supposed to be an event, an extraterrestrial event that occurs during that time period. Now, I know that depending on who you talk to, the dates vary, but I stick with it. I stick with that timeline because I can't explain exactly why, but there are people that I think probably would know something a lot more than I would know, or the public would know, who talk about that timeline between October of this year and August of 2027. Now, we hope it's not catastrophic. I hope it's not earth-shattering. I hope it's not end of life event. But I think something's going to happen. What that is, I don't know, but I think there's something that's going to happen. And I think there has been some members of Congress that's been briefed.
Well, the interesting thing about that is Chris Bledsoe, and he talked about a lot of these three-letter agencies. Maybe one of them, maybe it could be one that you work with, are very interested in him. So much so that apparently the Pope's got a picture of him in the Vatican, and he speaks about when the red star of Regulus aligns with the Sphinx, which is in March 2026 next year. And a lot of people have greenlit that. Astronomers have said, yeah, that is going to happen. So he puts a lot to that. Now, when you think about the intelligence services, those agencies that you worked for, paying close attention to this guy, do you think maybe there's a little bit more to what he's got to say than meets the eye initially? Just to finish off, and I mean, I'll let you get off after this. You can imagine your tea's or your dinner's nearly ready.
Chris Bledsoe has information that the government finds interesting, and there's a lot more to Chris Bledsoe than we know about. You or I know about, and there are intimate relationships between not just him but some others and intelligence community, the CIA. So the CIA is, I worked with them many times, the DIA. They're interested in anything that they can get that's out of the ordinary in a paranormal frame. And that goes all the way back to the creation of the CIA back in 1947. And because they hired, you go back and look at the history, the first 20 people they hired were paranormal people. They didn't hire the OSS guys. They hired these paranormal. Why?
Well, it
Well,
says
there's
it all when
reasons.
they declassified the Stargate files, didn't they? When all you have to do is take one look at that, and you can
Yeah,
sort of understand the kind of people that they
right.
were.
Exactly. And there were things going on back in those days that pertaining to stargates and portals and time portals that still haven't been declassified. There are smart people out there that have figured things out. The pyramids, the underground facilities under the pyramids in Sudan that few people talk about. The British Empire had a vast amount of knowledge because they owned Egypt and Sudan, and back in the 30s, 20s, and 30s, there's a vast amount of knowledge that the British government has regarding the creation and some of the strange anomalies, including stargates or time portals, they called them back in those days, around the Sphinx and about Sudan's pyramids and Egypt's pyramids. And your government has it someplace, and I'd like to see what your government has. I don't know where it's the Official Secrets Act stuff, but I would certainly. I mean, I've talked to some people, and I did a show on Gaia about a diary that Colonel Blumenthal, who was a great British expeditionary person, he explored Egypt back in the 30s, 20s, 30s, and the 20s and the late 30s. Talked about strange anomalies occurring in the pyramids that he found. So there's a lot more. I just wish that I could. I think there's a lot more to that than has ever been disclosed.
Well, if I could say something on that, it's interesting that King Charles's uncle, Lord Mountbatten, was very, very interested in the UAP on the NHI topic. And it's also very interesting that there are people out there that think or talk about these religious connections being in the Middle East, where essentially humanity was christened or born, of going in with 9/11 being a guise in order for us to be able to get in because we discovered the location of, say, the Ark of the Covenant, for instance, being in Iraq or something else. There are people that make those connections. And then when you think about these, the royal family and the Lord Mountbatten, his connection to the UAP subject and his interest in it, it could very well be the case. It could very well be the case that there is a dark and, clandestine multinational corporation of elites, essentially, that are pulling the strings on all of this. There's no borders, there's no nations. There is just them pulling the strings globally, which again would mean that the militaries of the world being the puppets, going in, causing a distraction while they sweep in and take up these archaeological information sources, these huge hordes of information that they're taking and suppressing from the public. Maybe there is something to that.
I don't doubt. I don't doubt there. I don't doubt it. There is. I find that subject to be fascinating. That the connections, worldwide connections. Because I spoke in Japan a year ago, October, at a university there in Yokohama, and there were people came up to me afterwards talking about some of the things, the connections that they have. Their government has secretly with other governments, and I realize that there is some entity out there that is controlling this. MJ12 has probably changed its name, but I think it's a foreign entity. It's not just U.S. I think because there's connections between other countries that could be controlling something. I know there's a particular person in the Prince of Liechtenstein. I don't know if you've heard that. Hans Adam. He has some strange travel at times to the United States and to other countries. There are people out there that are talking about him being part of this conglomerate of MJ12s or whatever you want to call them, that is pulling the purse strings on all.
Well,
these
if you
things,
look at the governments of the world, especially
UFO
if you look, yeah, if you look at especially if you look closely at the UK government, yeah, I know for a fact that Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, is part of a secret society. I know that. That's a fact. That's out there. That's public information. So maybe it wouldn't be a far stretch to think that perhaps the heads of these Masons or these secret societies worldwide, the very heads, the head of the snake, make up the members of this global union of multinational interests that control all of this thing. I don't think it's much of a stretch to think that. I don't want to spend too much time on it. I think it's a dark, deep state subject that potentially gets people in trouble and gets visits from people like we've been discussing earlier on this evening in the call. But I think that's as good a place as any to finish. I know I've taken way more than your time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rick, for jumping on. Much appreciated. You're a big name, obviously, in the field, and a lot of people listen to what you got to say and take what you got to say seriously. So, honestly, very grateful for you jumping on. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Great interview. Thank you.
Cheers, Rick. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys.
Cheers,
what we're going to do is we'll put a few links in the description of Rick's Gaia information and content that he was talking about earlier in the show. I don't know why I pointed up there, down there, the description. Please do like and subscribe and share this with your people. The more people that talk about this topic, the sooner maybe we will get a little bit closer to that disclosure that we're all yearning for. Otherwise, thank you very much for tuning in for another episode of Across the Pond, and see you next time.
Just in relation to some comments that you've made on a Facebook page. Across the Pond.
This is a Fox News alert. The Epstein files have been released.
Across the Pond.
You're looking at now, sir. Everything that happens now is happening
Very serious.
now.